bears depend on their ecosystem to eat enough to sustain the energy they require to breed their young and survive in the Arctic. But new research out of the University of Manitoba shows that other creatures in that same ecosystem largely depend on polar bears to survive, because whatever the bears eat and leave behind gets scavenged by many other animals. That's concerning because we know the warming climate is endangering polar bears, and this new research shows it could also affect the populations of many other species. Joining us now from the University of Manitoba is a carnivore biologist, Holly Gamblin. Good morning, Holly.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Now, this study, it took years to do this, and then writing the report, it took a few years as well. You wanted to do the study because there was nothing outlining exactly what happens to the other creatures that live with polar bears.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about why you wanted to do the study and why it's so significant.
Yeah, so I've been working with some polar bear researchers who have had this idea in the works for a while now. They were just looking for an eager student to take it on.
Okay.
And so it's really a collaboration effort where we're trying to provide a story that maybe has been told about polar bears as an apex predator. And so when you think about predators and their role in systems, there's all kinds of positive benefits they have in ecosystems. And this is one that's nobody's really talking about with polar bears. So we just wanted to bring it to the surface and combine what we already know and put the story together.
So polar bears, they hunt what? And then what do they do once they get their kill?
They hunt all kinds of different marine mammals depending on where they are in the Arctic, but overall their primary prey is ring seals across the Arctic.
Okay, and then what do they do with it once they catch it?
So a polar bear that's in really good body condition, when it makes a kill, it's what we call a blubber specialist. So they're really mostly interested and physiologically adapted to eating that blubber. And so they strip the blubber and then leave a lot of meat left on just on the ice for other critters.
That might be surprising to some people.
Yeah, and we actually wanted to know, okay, well, we know they're leaving meat, but how much is it actually that they're leaving? So we tried to estimate this value, and we estimated that polar bears are contributing over 7 million kilograms of meat across their range. And my lab mate looked this up. You can find little sources of like, how much does this weigh? It's 2 giraffes. And it actually, that weight, it turns into about 10,000 sedans, or the weight of the Eiffel Tower. So we're talking about like a lot of food that's just left there on the landscape for animals to eat.
And then those animals, which animals are we talking about that sort of come out of from everywhere to scavenge?
Yeah, so that's another piece of the puzzle we were trying to fit together. Like, who do we know scavenges? And a lot of people have seen that photo on social media of Arctic foxes following the polar bears. So there's a few species that we just know scavenge. And so we were trying to provide an overview of what's out there. So Arctic foxes, gulls, those are commonly identified scavengers, other bird species. But we were really surprised when we started diving into it that there's not a whole lot of information out there, even on the common scavengers, and even less is known throughout the range of species that might scavenge, but we just don't have records on it. And this is because nobody's really gone out to the ice and investigated this.
And they eat whatever they need, and then they take off, and then the next guy comes along and eats.
Pretty much. So they're providing this benefit to other species, but they're also really important for within species. So younger polar bears that might not be as effective hunters, or moms that are just coming out of the den with their cubs that are really hungry, they'll totally scavenge off of these kills also.
And so this is really significant, this piece of study, because this tells us just how important they are and their survival, why it's vital.
Yeah, absolutely. So we tried to paint that picture that if we lose polar bears, this is a resource that we're going to lose, not just for bears, but for all these other species that benefit from it.
And so if that happens, God forbid, if the sea ice continues to retreat and polar bears are in trouble and start disappearing, other species might also start disappearing.
Yeah, and my colleague actually, he's been working on this. Sean Johnson-Bice just released a paper that talked about how this even trickles down even further into the food web. So when we think about Arctic foxes and they scavenge a lot, his work was really showing, well, what happens on the tundra when they go out on the ice and they come back? What happens to those prey species? And so he's demonstrated how that can actually impact the different prey species that Arctic foxes are consuming.
So this is scary.
Yeah.
Okay, so what can we do in our everyday lives to try to help or mitigate this issue?
Yeah, that is really probably the biggest conservation concern for polar bears in the Arctic and really all species across the world. And it comes down to making changes on a global level that address climate change, and particularly human-induced climate change. Folks might not be aware, but the Arctic is warming at a rate that's 4 times the rate of the rest of the world. So this is an ecosystem that is being really impacted by climate change. So it's really going to take, I guess, on an individual level, thinking about how when we're voting and we're thinking about who's coming in and making these changes, who's going to prioritize environmental impacts and climate change.
Holly, thank you for sharing details on this. We really appreciate your time.